everyone. It's my honor and my pleasure. Um, I'm as we move along in life, we learn, and I learned from Antoinette quite. I've learned a lot from Antoinette throughout the years. I consider her a mentor, and one of the things I learned from the last session we had was the acknowledgement of our history. So I would like to say, as a biracial woman, I acknowledge my Black heritage from my paternal grandmother and her ancestors. And we are going to have hopefully a very lively discussions. As Marianne mentioned, if you have any questions that you would like yourself to ask, please, let us know, put it in the chat, and we will definitely get to it. So, in the continuum of our discussion for Black History Month, I would like us to look at Black History Month not just as a centralized piece of our Canadian history, but also as a continuum in that Black history does not end with at the end of February after 28 months. It continues and moves forward. And as practitioners, we are working with all various types of families. We do need to understand and to have specialized work with regards to our Black, Indigenous, and other racialized clients, as well as understanding how to work within our colleagues. So my first question to both Antoinette and to Walter is, how do we incorporate and enhance our practice by honoring Black, Indigenous, and other racialized clients, colleagues, and other professionals in our work?
I'll defer to Anthony to start with that.
Okay. I would say, first of all, being open and having a willingness to work with various people of varying backgrounds, actually, and listening to what people have to offer, listening to people's stories, and working with it, using that to integrate into basically your practice. You listen to people, you will hear their stories. And with these stories, you can integrate it into your work.
Thank you. Walter, anything you would like to add?
Yeah, I would say just having that cultural sensitivity and engaging with colleagues and with individuals coming into family mediation, encouraging, facilitating diversity of sort of trying to understand the experiences of those that we work with and those that we mediate, with as well in terms of families. And I think that would go a long way in kind of helping us in that regard.
Okay, so along the same line, how can we be inclusive in our practice? Beyond the listening, the cultural sensitivity, what other practical tips are there to be more inclusive within the practice?
Well, I think that people need to develop some understandings of people. I mean, you can't know about everybody's culture, and you can't know about everybody's background. But if you allow people to share their story or share the information, like for example, Anissa, you sort of introduce yourself by including some of your ancestry, right? And that is one simple and good way of making things more inclusive, because just from that, it sort of tells you a little bit about the person. And from that, I mean, in the mediation, when you're working with families, you can always ask the question, in your family, what has been the practice when there've been conflict in the family? And you will get a lot of information just from asking that one basic, simple question. And that would help to guide you through what you were doing. And, you know, for colleagues, if you aren't familiar with the background of a colleague or whatever, just ask the question. It's always good to ask a question, but don't make an assumption about who people are based on who they look like or what you think that their background is, because it can fool you. So just ask a question. That's
Would you
my
like,
That's excellent, Antoinette, and that resonates with me because I made some assumptions about Anissa that she very gently and kindly corrected me on. It was great to be corrected and just to see how easily the assumptions we make can be incorrect. Along with that, I would say, just having, a better awareness of our unconscious biases. We all have them. Blind spots as it relates to that. And being conscious about the potential impact of words and phrases that we may use, perhaps when interacting with our colleagues and or mediating with diverse families, I think would be of a tremendous benefit as well as looking at our understanding, at least attempting to understand, the socioeconomic factors that impact diverse families that we work with as they come into the mediation process.
And if I could just add one more thing, families, are different, even though, like, say, you're a family within a certain culture, you can't sort of make an assumption that because a person is from a certain culture, that this is how the family is going to function. You need to get a sense of that particular family and what is important and what isn't important in that family. Like, for example, how genders are dealt with. I'll give you a personal example. Like when I was growing up, I grew up where the elders, like my grandmother and those, they always catered to the boys. So the boys, they made sure that they prepared their meals, and boys only did certain things and girls had to do like other things. And I remember clearly, like when I was a teenager, I said, there's no way that's going to happen if I ever have children. If I ever have children, they're both going to learn to do the same thing. And I did that. So, just that little understanding of how a family functions, like say in everyday life, can provide you with so many lessons and so much information about how you can work with that family. So that's just one example.
Antoinette, you've actually touched into the next question, which are the ways in which, as mediators, we may look at how forms of oppression may have a disproportional impact on Black and Indigenous and racialized clients we serve. Like, in what ways, as mediators, we should be looking at oppression?
Wanda, I would really like to hear from some of the members of the audience. Really, I don't want to be the one responding to all these questions. I would like to hear. I'm seeing a chat here where someone is saying that they grew up in a gender-specific household as well with all boys. Does that person want to share some more, Matilda?
You can feel free to unmute yourself. There you go.
Oh, so I was just going to say I relate to what you're saying, just because I have 5 brothers, and being the only girl, it wasn't, I'm from West Africa, And so my dad was very much like, boys do this and girls do this. And my brothers got to do basically whatever they wanted. And mine was very specific. And he would reiterate that girls only get to do certain things. They couldn't go play basketball. Like, it was just very specific. So I totally, when you were telling that story, it was like, I thought it was just, sometimes you think it's just you. And being from that Ghanaian background, that's just how it is, right? That's what they know. That's what I've been raised on. And same thing, I had a daughter and I was like, there is no way we're doing that. So, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for that. There's another chat, Anissa. I think it's from Claudette. I think inclusivity means respect. Treat others as you would like to be treated. Yeah, so true. So very true.
Okay. Unfortunately, I can't read the chat. The
Yeah,
chat's
it's
not
okay.
showing up
I'll keep my eye.
on thank you.
If you put chat to all co-hosts, like it should come to all of us, but it's funny because I didn't see that one either.
Oh, okay.
We had it set the way we had it for last time. I don't know if you
I think those two chats came directly to me.
Oh,
Okay,
someone sent you a
yes.
direct message. Okay, okay.
All
So
right.
you can, participants can send messages to all the co-hosts. So Anissa, myself,
Yeah.
and Walter will all be able to
Yeah.
see it, and
Yeah.
we'll look at the questions that way.
Mhm.
So let me pose this to Walter, Antoinette, and to anyone in the audience who's willing to voice their opinion. How can we use knowledge? Actually, this is more for Antoinette. The case that you presented the last time we met with regards to the father, right? That you had spoken about. How can we use the knowledge of that case or in mediation, especially with cases of Black, Indigenous, and racialized people, to be critical of our own practice and address our own biases?
Yeah, that's the one where we were both Black, but from different
Yes.
places, right?
Yes.
Yeah, so basically, and this is something that people need to understand, that our clients make assumptions about us, right? And so sometimes you might need to clear that ear, because that particular case, he made an assumption that because I was Black, I will understand him better. And the initial mediator that was going to work with him had a good understanding of, as much as she could, had a good understanding of how to work, with that family. But he didn't want it. The moment that he saw that I was Black, that's all he needed, because he felt that I could fix everything and I was going to create miracles. And the thing about it is that no, I wasn't going to create miracles, because I needed to learn as much about him as he had to learn about me and where I was coming from and the work basically that I was doing. So going back to what I said initially, you really need to be open to what people bring to the table in order to be able to develop an understanding of how to work with these people. I learned a lot from that case, and the students who were training with me, they learned a lot as well, because there were a lot of things to learn about. I learned about what it meant to be part of a clan, and that might be only one learning, because there might be other clans that operate completely differently. But that particular one, I learned a lot about that, and I had a good understanding because I didn't know. I did not have an understanding, and I did not pretend to know anything. So I said to him, like, please tell me. And, and I think in that same case, what happened is that these two people had someone in the community to whom they would take the information after the mediation to and discuss. And they kept referring to this person as the Queen Mother. And I said to them, well, who is this person? And then they told me who this person was. And so it raised the question, well, should this person have been included as part of the conversation with these people? Because they were taking stuff to this person was guiding them and telling them certain things in terms of what to do. And the person was meeting with both of them, which was an amazing thing. So sometimes you might need to restructure your practice, restructure your session in a way that will accommodate and that will work, for the families. I hope that answered your question, Anissa. But
Yes,
that was one of the learnings that we got from that case.
Would anyone else in the audience like to reflect on any of the cases and the learnings that they've had with working with Black racialized families?
It's Claudette, and sorry, I'm not going to put my camera on. It's
Mhm.
bad hair day. But I remember, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I remember I actually got a file transferred to me from another mediator, reassigned to me from another mediator. And this was a Black family. And one of the main concern they had, especially the female, was that the mediator kept telling them what they should be agreeing upon, and most of that was based on their experience in North America and what they were used to. And the expectation, she said, was that she felt that she had to toe the line because this is the way it's done in North America. And so she felt that, mediation was supposed to be collaborative, but from the previous mediator, it felt that they were being directed, right? So they didn't feel that as though they had a voice, but yet they were told this is a process where you do have a voice. So I think as a practitioner, we have to make sure that we don't impose what we know in our lives and our upbringing onto other people, because their experiences are, it's very different, and they want to be able to direct their lives just like we do as practitioners. No one tells us what to do. We shouldn't have to tell them that they should follow a certain, they should agree to certain things because it's their mediation agreement. And if they don't agree with it, they're not going to follow it.
Yeah. Well, that's so important though, Claudette, because like somebody has the hand raised, Stephen, I think. I can hold my thought, but Stephen has his hand up. I don't know where Stephen is.
You can go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
You can
I
go
see
ahead. I can pause.
Mhm.
Why don't you finish your trend of
You-
thought, Antoinette?
Okay, so basically what I was going to say, like, yeah, you were trained in North America, and this was a situation with that family and myself, like having my training here in North America. But at the same time, I was open to hearing and learning information from them about their culture and what it works, and then looking at how it can be integrated or incorporated into whatever it is that they wanted to work out. Because if you don't have that understanding or knowledge of how these people function, then your mediation is going to fail because it's not going to work, right? And there were some specific things that they each wanted, and I needed to incorporate that into whatever we were working out.
Okay, thank you, Antoinette. Samantha?
Samantha, yeah.
Hi, sorry, I just want to thank Anissa for inviting me to this platform. I'm a student in her current program, and I asked her if anything's going on, if I could jump on. I'd love to be able to experience things in real time, in real life. So this has been a great opportunity to come in and learn from people who have been in the practice and have skills that are developed that are supporting our families. I just so much that I'm learning and want to just reiterate around. I think one of the first things coming from education, one of the things we really focus on with our families is looking at Black history as more than just history, but looking at it as heritage. And if we can take away the stigma of that we are only people who are coming from a historical perspective, but that we also have a history that predates colonization and that exists today, then we can hopefully see people as coming to us, even if they're coming to us with disproportionate outcomes or displacement or impacted by oppression, that they're coming with agency. And that agency should drive and be centered in the work that we do. So when I look at the questions that Anissa is asking, and we think about how do we decenter ourselves and our own positionality and our own social location in the work, so that when people come to us and we don't have a deep understanding of their cultural background and identity, that we're allowing them to drive the wheel, as opposed to us sort of mitigating the formulation or the facilitation from our own perceived knowledge of who they are and how they operate in the world. And one of the biggest challenges that Black people have in every realm is that we're always seen as the victims. And I think a lot of times facilitation probably looks like, you know, this poor Black family, even if it's not said out loud, there's a misperception that we come from situations that have always victimized us, so we don't have any strength and empowerment. But Black people are formidable people. They are empowered people. They're resistant people. They have a history in Canada from the 1600s. So we're not people who are always, we're not immigrants to this country. And all of that has to be seen as an asset and not a deficit.
Thank you very much, Samantha. You basically answered my question around leveraging clients' agency. So I really appreciate that. Thank you.
Yeah.
So
There's
Anissa,
another hand up,
Anissa,
Anissa.
Stephanie has a hand up.
Stefan.
Stefan, sorry.
Hi. Yeah, so what I wanted to say is I sent a message to Marianne in the chat, but what Antoinette was speaking about a little bit earlier, I'm just going to reiterate what I wrote for the group, but I said, suspend judgment and seek to understand further. Like, we think of that as a sort of a basis for mediation. And I think we can also apply this to our own perceptions to help us keep an open curiosity to learn about our clients and better understanding their needs to meet them where they're at. And so to pick up on what Antoinette said, I think that if you understand what it is that they're coming from as best as possible through that healthy curiosity, then they can be empowered to come to their own agreements that will suit them. And we know that when people contribute to their own solution, they're more likely to follow through. And that's a sense of agency that I think Samantha was also touching on. So I just want to throw that in. But yeah. Thanks.
Thank you very much, Stefan. Marianne, do we have any more questions from or anything on the chat? Just checking.
No, I think Stefan's was the last message that I was going to just jump in. It's interesting because I think you were speaking about insight, Stefan, and using insight and deepening and trying to meet clients and understand and seek to learn, which is what we're doing every day.
I think it's sometimes very hard for people to, and general people, to wrap their head around other groups that are unlike them. I remember being in a situation, this was at dinner with a bunch of former colleagues, and we were talking about the amount of food that was wasted. People sending food back or not finishing it at their table. So the servers came and collected a whole bunch of food, and someone made a comment that, look at all that food going to waste. So many people in Africa starving. We have people here starving, but that picture that so many people have in mind about what poor or disadvantages, I guess is what these what is that? These commercials you used to see way back when. You see these starving people in Africa, and you see generally this little boy or little girl with flies flying around there, and every time people see Africa, that's their perception, right? That is not what Africa is. That is not, these are people who are impacted by wars, by famines, by just civil war. And when we look at even places like Ukraine right now, going through the same thing, you would never say people in Ukraine are starving, even though they may have been coming out of the same thing, right? So it's that idea that only certain groups, or even Syria, when Syria was involved, only certain groups could look a certain way and should be looked at with some sort of pity. And so I really had to dive into a deep discussion with this person, but she's not alone. This is how a lot of people think about difference. But we have to change that.
Absolutely, along with the language that we use, right? I remember having to work with a mediator whom was dealing with clients from Congo, and the language was, well, we control Congo. Well, the history of the Congolese massacres, annihilation, is a very tragic history, world history, and to speak in that language of a colonizer with clients can be very detrimental for the clients, right? So thank you, Claudette.
And it could cause harm too, eh?
It re-traumatizes the clients,
Right.
and
Yes.
you know, we speak about we carry our ancestors with us. We have within us what's referred to as blood memory. The indigenous communities speak about blood memory. We speak about having that memory of a slavery. But also I want to mention, in terms of what Samantha was saying, there has been many, if Samantha and Claudette also tapped into, Africa is not what Africa is portrayed as. It's not it's not the jungle. It's not people starving and suffering. There,
And
Africa
killing women.
has amazing, you know, history, civilization, struggles, the birthplace of humanity, right? Coming from that quadrant of the world, but also the societies, the civilization, the architect, the artwork, and not every, you know, Black person that comes before us as a client may have ever experienced poverty in their life.
True.
They may have come from a position of much more entitlement than a Western person or a Caucasian person may have ever experienced. So keeping that in mind, it just draws attention to the history that we have to acknowledge, not the history of only suffering, but the history of achievement as well. This leads
think-
me to
Matilda has a message here. Even language, such as black sheep of the family, Africa is a continent, not a country, not a one size fits all.
Right.
So within that continent, there's so many different types as well. Thank you, Matilda. You want
Thank
to
you.
say more about that, Matilda? Wherever Matilda is.
No, that's fine. I'll leave it.
Matilda, I like the fact that you said that, because I have learned in one of my class, one of my fellow students objected to the terminology, it's either black or white, right?
Yeah.
That everything black is supposed to be negative.
Yeah.
And degrading, right? While white is supposed to be the light and everything positive. And this particular student objected to that. And I learned no longer to say black and white. I would say life has a lot of grays in it, right? And not use that terminology because it may resonate with a particular person. And just being mindful of that type of language that we use. Thank you for sharing, Matilda.
If I can just share.
Such an important part in the process in general. And so,
yeah,
you know, kind of reiterating what Samantha was saying, just being mindful of the language that is being used. You know, it has become so natural to say certain things and not think about it, but it's time to start making that shift in our minds and in people's minds. And the more times you reiterate it, as you mentioned, gray or using something else, people's minds will start to shift instead of using black and white, because it's divisive, right? So, yeah.
Mhm.
Samantha
lang-
Samantha has on this topic. You sent me a direct message. Would you want to share that? It was a good one too, on the language topic.
Yeah, I just think, you know, and even again, when we talk about Black agency, Black people were not slaves. We were never slaves. We were never born as slaves. We were enslaved people. It was forced enslavement. And that's a very different conceptualization, because then you acknowledge that if people came into the world as slaves, again, they came into a specific positionality that is natural to their identity. But we did not come into the world as slaves. We are actually the original people from Africa, and all ancestry comes from Africa. Black people were enslaved as part of a colonialization and systemic racism that put us in a position for over 400 years to be indentured. And that indentured has landed us, even years after enslavement, into societies where every element of society, there is a disproportionate disproportionate impact on the way that we're able to live and thrive. You know, Ibram Kendi speaks about the importance of reflecting on our own identities and interrogating all of the things we do, even simple things like the mediation script that you read. Are we asking people to share how they identify? Because if they share how they identify, then when we're giving them resources, we can give them resources that are culturally specific or that are enriched and part of their own community. And just by asking that simple question, if we have to make a CAS call, we can make a call and then advocate for the family and let the person know who's taking the report that we're working with a Black family. And we're hoping that as they go through this process, that they're aware that the Black family needs to be giving specific needs to support them through this investigation. So it's just having that level of consciousness that we are not people who were slaves by birth. We were enslaved from the onset of colonization and our contact with white civilization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Antoinette?
No, I was going to say, like, sometimes too, when we're working with people of different cultures, like you have a couple coming together, different cultures. Sometimes those cases are very critical because you sort of have to even expand your knowledge more in terms of understanding the differences and where are the differences that's occurring between these two people. You know, what is it? And those kind of things. And I just would give an example of a case I worked on a while ago, where the woman was Indigenous and the man was of white Anglo-Saxon. And it had to do with deciding on custody and parenting arrangements. And basically, what the woman said to me, she said, I don't care if the children live and are raised by him. All I want is for my children to be acknowledged as Indigenous and understanding the learnings and the teachings of the Indigenous people. That's all basically she wanted. And he was having real difficulty understanding how important that was. And this was before the government declared, you know, the Truth and Reconciliation and all that. And these are some of the things that were basically happening among families. And it was important to understand that, to recognize it, and to work with the other party in terms of understanding that request and that wish, which meant so much to her and which was so important. Just wanted to share that.
Thank you. Does anyone else would like to add to this discussion? Feel free to put your hand up. That being it, I would like to move on to, and then putting it to the audience as well as to Antoinette and Walter. How can we promote ongoing education and awareness among our colleagues regarding the culture and historical factors such as systemic racism, oppression, and the ways it operates in the lives of our clients.
I think definitely forums like what we're having now should become more common. They shouldn't just be during Black History Month. They should be ongoing conversations that take place, which I believe would definitely add value in an ongoing way, not just, you get a big, hit of, caffeine, once, and then you forget about it after the fact. So having those ongoing conversations with each other and with persons who are culturally diverse, our colleagues who are culturally diverse, like what we're doing today. I mean, I'm learning a lot. I appreciate this a whole lot. I'm learning things I, may not have necessarily have, learned easily, have it not been said here today. Yes, I know I can go research, and that's something we can all do. And that's another thing we can do, just provide resources, provide links, provide places, people that we can reach out to or go to in order to self-learn as well. Some of these things so that we can benefit from it personally and apply it in our practices as well, collectively and individually.
Yeah, I agree what Walter is saying, but I was also paying attention to the chat because there's another chat there in response to what I just said about the case I had. And Samantha is saying again, it's so important because she was probably so impacted by the Indian Act and the erasure of her Indigenous identity by law. Very true. She was very concerned about that and did not want it erased from her children. It's all right. Yeah. Thank you. But I agree. We need to have open dialogue and more of it more frequently. And I think by having these conversations, and thanks to Marianne for thinking about doing this today, because this follow-up, because I think it's important because we're hearing and learning so much today. That this is good. So continuing the dialogue among us as practitioners, and we're a small group within society, but small group learns and it sort of extends to other people, then that's an important piece.
And you also have to realize that because there's so few of us in this line of work, just compared to other professions, everything we do gets out there. So if someone has a bad experience with someone else is going to know, and it just multiplies. The more positive the experience, the more referrals we're likely going to get. So that it's important that we just put ourselves out there as, the walking billboard for fairness, for respect, and just loyalty and fidelity to the whole process of mediation.
Mm-hmm. That being the case, what do you see as the systemic barriers for Black, Indigenous, and racialized communities, clients, in mediation?
Well, yeah, I think
Stefan?
Yeah.
Just briefly, maybe for clients to find mediators who represent more of someone that's more likely to them, just recognizably more likely to them. But I think that the very last comment that Claudette made about values, to me, is a great equalizer, right? So, and it goes back to treating others the way we want to be treated. So I think if we take the universal values and operate from there and strive to, like I said before, suspend judgment and then hold space for people to tell us what they need and show an openness to listen, then I think we're well on our way. But I think it may be difficult for people who may prefer a mediator who's of the same cultural background or other differences that they identify strongly with, that it's important for them to feel more understood, that over time the practice of mediation will provide that kind of diversity with more people joining.
And if I can just add to that as well, is that we need to understand that the practice of mediation is still structured within an Anglo-Saxon framework. The courts are set within an Anglo-Saxon framework, and out of that comes basically the mediation. So we need to be very aware of that and how those type of barriers can impact on the work that we're doing. And unless we are willing to make some changes to how we do the work, then it will not change. So we need to be very aware of that.
Samantha?
Yeah, and I think, I'm going to say something that I hope people don't take offense to. It's the same challenge we have in education. In the educational sphere, most of the educators in our system are white women. 80% of our board is made up of white people. And the work of anti-racism and equalization and the humanization of people is really white people's work. It's really digging deep down into the consciousness that's been entrenched in all of us, because racism it impacts everyone. Black people are racist, white people are racist, anybody can be racist. So even the notion that somebody has to have somebody who looks like them in order to feel safe in an environment is a false narrative, because sometimes the person who looks the most like you doesn't have the consciousness to create a safe space for you as well. So we always are looking for people to elevate their consciousness by interrogating their practice and looking really intrinsically at what am I doing that's not allowing me to provide a safe space for people to come as they are, to come as they are in their lived experience in a wholesome way without judgment or harm.
Yeah, if I may respond to that, I just want to make sure that I wasn't misconstrued, because when I said, what I was responding to was what are the barriers potentially for people. So I wasn't speaking from my position, because my position remains that it's about values at the end of the day and how I respond to people. But a client who may be seeking and may be finding barriers, I thought that might illustrate a barrier, a perception barrier that they may have. But I think that I'll just reach back to my previous life as a police officer. There were many times it was always taught, if there's a sexual assault and there's a female officer, should be made available for that female victim. That's not always practicable, and it didn't always happen. And in my experience, and I investigated hundreds, if not thousands, sexual assaults, many times I would make the offer, and I would say it may be a few hours before we can locate a female officer. And invariably, after I had a chance to speak with the victim, the survivor, she was able to say, no, it's okay, I'll speak with you. And it always went well. So, I mean, as relatively well, I'm talking from the standpoint of the investigation. I think I was able to show that despite the different gender, different best practices that were believed at the time and may still be in use, I was able to overcome that with sensitivity and by treating the person with respect and value and care. And I think that's what I was alluding to. But I think for the person who's seeking a mediator, they could themselves, through no ill perception or ill will or understanding, they may be, I think we're just naturally as human beings, I think it's fair to acknowledge we're drawn to people that are like us. So, but being aware of those things as a mediator, I think is pretty important. But I don't think it could constitute a barrier for somebody who's seeking to find a mediator if they have that belief. I think I just wanted to draw a little distinction there.
I think that's so important. What I just picked up, what I heard from you is that what you gave that victim was a choice. I think everyone likes to know that they have a choice to say yes or no and not just impose certain wishes on them. So that's key.
Thank you. But with that choice comes the practitioner that's working with that person. I don't know about many of you, but how many of us are aware of what's resources are available for individuals within the community, within the Black community? What resources are there for fathers, first-time fathers, right? What resources are there for childcare services or educational services within this community? And maybe we do need to we need to take a look at having a list of resources, whether it's through OAFM or as a private practitioner, having it within your resource list, resources for Pacific communities that addresses their needs.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That would definitely be of tremendous help, I believe.
I wanted just to, there's a little soft launch of our project, which is the OAFM virtual library that Archana and I have been working on. The resources that you shared last week are actually in there now. And it is under the OAFM virtual library tab at the home screen. And so if you have resources that you'd like us to add, if you could send me a PDF, I'll add anything there that is appropriate for our mediation community to be added. So
I think
Antoinette,
even, Marianne, sorry.
Mhm.
I think we could probably even add 211 Toronto on the OFM website at some point, because you can really just fine tune whatever resources you're looking for. You know, if it's services for rape victims in Lindsay, Ontario, we can just dial in Lindsay and it just spits out a few resources there. I mean, that's a broad resource database, but it's certainly better than nothing.
Nothing. We have quite a good, like take a look. There's quite a nice amount of articles there, and we just started. We haven't announced it yet. So you get a little special preview if you go and look on our site. It is there under OAFM Virtual Library on the homepage, and you can send me things, and we're adding every day. But 211 is a good idea. Maybe I could put that link on it. I could probably just put that link within the folder right now. I'll do that. Thanks,
Vicky, you have your hand up?
I do. I just want to remind folks that every community also has information and referral coordinators that are connected to the Ministry of the Attorney General. And one of their roles is to be up to date in relation to community resources. So it might help on this OAFM library to have the IRCs for each community listed there as well in terms of either their website or their email address, because they have a wealth of information that's community-based, right? Community-based and also more general as well, but specific to each community that they're servicing.
Yeah, the IRCs really tap into 211 though. I mean, I certainly did this when I was in Cobourg and Lindsay. We rely heavily on that. So I don't think there would be a really big difference there.
Samantha?
Yeah, and I think if you're collecting resources, to think of the intersectionality of identity. So if I'm Black and Indigenous and disabled, like, you know, Black people exist, again, not as a monolith. We exist like everyone else, where we have intersecting identities, and some of those identities may experience oppression at different times based on whatever environment or situation we're in.
Exactly.
So I may be Black and not experiencing racism as a Black person, but experiencing ableism as a person with a disability. So it's really being able to understand that all of those identities make up a person, including Black people. Professor George Day, who is Canadian and works out of the University of, I think it's Toronto, he talks about integrative anti-racism. I shared a link, and I think his perspective on how we really have to deconstruct the way we see identity and the way we support people and all their identities as a whole person is really foundational to doing good work and effective work in any realm of society.
Yeah, I totally agree.
There are two books that I know we're kind of running out of time, two books that I think would be of interest to everyone. One being Desmond Cole, The Skin I'm In. It's a Canadian book,
yeah.
right? That speaks about anti-Black racism, anti-Indigenous racism as lived within the Canadian context. And another book, Layla Saad, It's Me and White Supremacy, Unlearning Biases and Reflective Practice. So these are two books. I don't know if anyone has ever read them, if they would like to
I have this
elaborate.
Nicole's book. Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? I've got both. I can grab them and just show you. Layla Saad's book is brilliant. It's made predominantly for white people. But again, I think racism is a social construct. We are all impacted by the social construct of racism, and it permeates everybody's thought processes. Even as a Black person, I have to unpack racism and colonization in the way it's lived in my own life, right? So, but Layla Saad does a really good job of just asking provocations. So in your day-to-day existence, do you think about these questions? Or when you come to an experience or engagement with a person who's racialized, what are your first thoughts and how do you unpack the first thought? Because racism is interesting. People get very upset. They don't want to call themselves a racist. And I'm very adamant that I will call myself a racist. I am racist because racism is a social construct and we've all been socialized to it. What makes you anti-racist is your constant everyday investment in unlearning and deconstructing colonization that's lived in your life. So that's how we develop an anti-racist stance. But she really says, like, how do you take your day-to-day experiences and unpack them on the minutest level to be able to allow somebody else to live with humanity and dignity? And Desmond Cole does an absolute brilliant
Yeah, this is the
job.
book. This is the book.
Yes, he does a brilliant job of basically saying we need to stop saying racism is an American problem because there's evidence historically contemporary that demonstrate that racism is lived right here in Canada and it's lived generationally, intergenerationally, and it has had extensive impacts on populations of people. And we have work to do right here.
So we're almost up. And what I would like to leave you all with is think of ways to incorporate and celebrate and the recognition of Black history within our organization, culture, practices throughout the year beyond these designated months. Okay, so thank you all very much for, okay, oh, you have one upside down. Perfect. Is there any last questions, any comments from anyone? I think we've had I really envisioned this session being a round table and it actually evolved into what I wanted. So thank you all for participating and supporting us all in our learning and moving forward. Okay.
That's right. Thank you so much,
Thank you,
Anissa.
guys. Great job.
Yeah, thank you, Antoinette. Thank you, Walter.
Thank you.
You're
I'm just
welcome.
wondering, Marianne, if Marianne can send out like all these wonderful resources that.
I just
she
put
did.
them,
Okay.
put them in the chat right there. I'm gonna stop
Okay.
our recording right now.
Yeah.